Ever heard of Mari Copeny?
Can't say I have.
Well, she's only 18, but she's already like a powerhouse activist. When she was just 8, she wrote a letter to President Obama about the water crisis in Flint, Michigan,
Oh, wow.
and ended up meeting him face to face.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's the kind of energy we're talking about today, you know, how Gen Z is taking like the torch of Black activism and using it to light up the whole world,
Right.
especially online. So we're diving deep into this article from February 6th of this year.
Okay.
It's called The Untold Impact of Black Activism on Gen Z.
Interesting.
And we're going to see how this generation is like reshaping what activism looks like in the digital age.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating how someone like Mari can go from writing a letter to like being a voice for her entire community.
Right.
It really shows how Gen Z is fearless when it comes to using whatever tools they have to, make a change.
They're not waiting for permission.
Exactly.
Or a formal invitation. They're jumping in and saying, hey, we're here and we're not going to be silent.
I love that.
So before we get into all the amazing things Gen Z is doing, I think it's important to understand where this energy comes from, right?
Absolutely.
Black activism has a long and powerful history in the U.S.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We can trace this thread all the way back to, like, the fight against slavery.
Right.
Think about Frederick Douglass. Escaped slavery and became this powerful voice for abolition, publishing his own newspaper, delivering speeches that challenged, the very foundation of America's racist system.
It's incredible. And it reminds me of how, like, Gen Z activists are using their own platforms like social media to control the narrative and speak truth to power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that connection between generations is so important.
Yeah.
And we see this direct link, again, during the civil rights movement. We often focus on iconic figures like Martin Luther King Jr.
Right.
And rightfully so. But the movement was powered by young people, many of them, like college students who risked their lives to challenge segregation and demand equal rights.
Those sit-ins, the freedom rides, the marches.
Exactly.
They were all about young people saying, enough is enough.
Yeah.
They were willing to put their bodies on the line for justice.
Absolutely. And they were incredibly strategic in their use of media, too.
Oh, interesting.
Think about the images of like peaceful protesters being attacked by police dogs and fire hoses.
Yeah.
Those images broadcast on television. They shocked the nation and helped turn the tide of public opinion.
Wow.
In a way, they were going viral before going viral was even a thing.
So they were already understanding the power of visuals and storytelling to galvanize support.
Exactly.
It's like a preview of what Gen Z is doing today with social media.
Exactly. And that brings us to like a key point, the resurgence of Black activism in recent years and its impact on Gen Z.
Okay.
And we see this most clearly with the Black Lives Matter movement.
That movement feels like a watershed moment. That hashtag Black Lives Matter, became a rallying cry for a whole generation. It wasn't just a slogan. It was a demand for justice, for accountability, for a fundamental shift in how we value Black lives.
And it's Gen Z who really embraced that message and amplified it online. They took to social media to share their stories, organize protests, and demand action from, their elected officials.
And it wasn't just about posting on social media. They took that energy offline and organized marches and rallies, bringing the fight for racial justice to the streets. They understood that real change requires both online and offline action.
Yeah. And their understanding of how these issues intersect is really important. Yeah. Angela Davis, a scholar and activist who's been fighting for social justice for decades, has been a huge influence on Gen Z. And her work on intersectionality has helped them understand you can't talk about race without talking about gender, class, sexuality, and all these other systems of oppression that are interconnected.
Okay, so before we move on, can we break down intersectionality a bit more?
Sure.
It's a word that gets thrown around a lot, but I think it's important to understand what it really means, especially for our listener.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Imagine like a spider web, right?
Okay.
Each strand represents a different aspect of a person's identity. Their race, their gender, their economic status, their sexual orientation, and so on. And where all those strands intersect, that's where you find a person's unique experience in the world.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So it's not just about adding up different identities. It's about understanding how they interact and create a complex, layered experience.
Exactly. And Gen Z gets that. They see the world through this intersectional lens,
Yeah.
which allows them to connect with and support
Yeah.
wider range of movements.
So Black activism isn't just about fighting racism.
Right.
It's about fighting for justice and equality for everyone, recognizing that these issues are all intertwined.
And that's where we see the real power of Gen Z's activism.
Yeah.
They're not just fighting for their own rights. They're fighting for the rights of all marginalized communities, understanding that liberation is interconnected.
It's like a rising tide lifts all boats.
Exactly.
But speaking of boats, let's steer our conversation toward the digital ocean that Gen Z is navigating so well. Social media.
Oh, yeah.
It's impossible to talk about Gen Z's activism without talking about social media.
Absolutely.
It's their primary tool for communication, organization, and mobilization.
Right.
It's how they share information, connect with each other, and build communities around shared values.
For sure.
Okay, but how is their use of social media different from previous generations? I mean, we all use social media, right?
It's not just about using the platforms, it's about how they use them.
Okay.
Gen Z is incredibly savvy when it comes to creating content that goes viral, using humor, memes, and personal storytelling to grab attention and get people talking about these issues. They're not afraid to be bold, to be provocative, to push the boundaries of what's considered acceptable online.
So it's about meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
Using the language of the internet to spark conversations and raise awareness.
Exactly. Take the hashtag Black Lives Matter hashtag, for example.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a way to categorize tweets. It was a way to create a movement, a sense of solidarity, a platform for sharing experiences and demanding justice.
Right.
And it worked. That hashtag went viral, spreading awareness of police brutality and systemic racism to a global audience.
It was like a digital wave that crashed over the world, forcing people to confront these issues head on. And it wasn't just about raising awareness. It was about translating that awareness into action.
Right. We saw people using social media to organize protests, donate to bail funds, and put pressure on elected officials to enact policy changes.
Like social media became this command center for activism, coordinating efforts and mobilizing resources in a way that we hadn't seen before.
And it wasn't limited to the Black Lives Matter movement. We saw similar tactics being used in the hashtag #MeToo movement, the climate strikes, the fight for gun control. Gen Z is using social media to create change across a wide range of issues.
It's like they've cracked the code of digital activism, figuring out how to harness the power of these platforms to amplify their voices and create real-world impact.
And it's not just about the big headline-grabbing campaigns. It's also about the everyday conversations that are happening online, the sharing of personal stories, the challenging of harmful stereotypes, the educating of friends and family members who might not be as aware of these issues.
So it's like social media has become this massive interconnected web of consciousness raising where even small interactions can contribute to a larger shift in perspective.
Exactly. And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of Gen Z's influence, the importance of representation in media.
Right. It's not just about what's happening on the streets or on social media. It's about how Black stories and experiences are being portrayed in music, film, television, and art.
And what's fascinating here is how these portrayals can shape Gen Z's understanding of themselves, their history, and their place in the world.
Yeah.
They're growing up with more diverse voices and perspectives than previous generations.
Right.
And that's having a huge impact on how they view the world and their role in it.
I'm thinking about someone like Beyoncé.
No.
She's not just a musician. She's a cultural icon who uses her platform to celebrate Blackness, to challenge stereotypes, to inspire a whole generation to embrace their heritage and demand their rightful place in society.
And it's not just about, like, established figures like Beyoncé. Gen Z is using social media to elevate the voices of up-and-coming Black artists, writers, filmmakers, and activists who are creating their own narratives and challenging the status quo.
It's like they're curating their own media landscape, one that reflects their values and their vision for the future. And they're holding mainstream media accountable, calling out bias, and demanding more inclusive and authentic representation.
Absolutely.
They understand that representation matters, that seeing yourself reflected in the stories being told can have a profound impact on your sense of self-worth and your belief in your own possibilities.
That's right.
So it's not just about entertainment. It's about empowerment.
Exactly. Representation in media can be a powerful tool for social change, and Gen Z is using it to its full potential.
This is all so fascinating.
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground already, the historical roots of Black activism, how Gen Z is building on that legacy, the role of social media, the importance of representation, and this key concept of intersectionality.
Absolutely.
But as you said earlier, it's not just about adding up identities.
Right.
It's about understanding how they interact and shape a person's unique experience in the world.
For sure.
So how is this intersectional approach influencing the specific challenges that Gen Z activists face?
Yeah, and how they're tackling those challenges.
Well, it's like they're juggling so many different balls at once, you know.
Yeah.
Fighting for racial justice, gender equality, LGBTQ plus rights, climate action.
Right.
And they're doing it all while navigating the unique challenges of being, young activists in the digital age.
It's a lot to carry.
Yeah, for sure.
And the article doesn't shy away from, the dark side of this digital landscape.
Right.
One of the biggest challenges Gen Z activists face is online harassment. Social media can be a powerful tool for connection and mobilization.
Yeah.
But it can also be a breeding ground for hate speech, trolling, and cyberbullying.
Just sure.
It's like there's this constant barrage of negativity coming at them from all sides.
Right.
From trolls who try to silence their voices to algorithms that can suppress their content and limit their reach.
Yeah.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
And it can have a real impact on their mental health.
I mean, we're seeing a rise in anxiety, depression, and burnout among young activists who are constantly exposed to images and stories of trauma and injustice.
It's like they're carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, and it's taking a toll.
It is.
The article mentions a study that found that nearly 70% of Gen Z activists have experienced online harassment. And over half have reported feeling burnt out or overwhelmed by their activism. Those are staggering numbers.
They are. And it's not just the emotional toll.
Right.
Online harassment can also have, real-world consequences.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we've seen cases of activists being doxxed, having their personal information shared online, which can lead to threats, stalking, and even violence.
It's terrifying to think that simply speaking out for justice can put you at risk.
Yeah, it's scary.
So what can be done to protect Gen Z activists from this online abuse?
Well, I think social media platforms need to do a much better job of, moderating content and enforcing their policies against hate speech and harassment. They need to create safer spaces for activists to organize and share their messages.
Right.
Without fear of being attacked.
I think that's a huge part of it, but it also feels like we need a cultural shift, right?
Absolutely.
We need to create a climate where online harassment is not only unacceptable, but actively challenged and condemned.
I agree.
We need to teach young people how to be responsible digital citizens.
Yeah.
How to identify and report harassment, and how to support each other when it happens.
Right.
We need to hold those who engage in harassment accountable for their actions.
Absolutely.
It's we need to create a digital immune system.
Yeah, I like that.
That can fight off the toxins of hate and abuse.
That's a great analogy.
And it's not just about protecting ourselves from harm.
Right.
It's also about creating a more positive and supportive online environment where activists can thrive.
Exactly. But even with a supportive community, burnout is still a major issue.
Right.
It's not sustainable to be constantly engaged in activism, especially when you're dealing with the emotional toll of fighting for justice.
It's like running a marathon without ever stopping to rest or refuel. You're going to hit a wall eventually.
And that's where self-care becomes so important.
Yeah.
Gen Z activists need to learn how to prioritize their own well-being, how to set boundaries, how to disconnect from social media when they need to, and how to engage in activities that bring them joy and replenish their energy.
It's like the oxygen mask on an airplane.
Exactly.
You have to put on your own mask first before you can help others.
Exactly. And it's not selfish to prioritize self-care.
Right.
It's essential.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
That's right. So it's about finding that balance between staying engaged and informed without letting the fight for justice consume you entirely.
And it's about recognizing that activism isn't just about grand gestures or being on the front lines of every protest. It's about finding ways to integrate these values of justice and equity into your everyday life. So it's about making conscious choices about the content you consume, the businesses you support, conversations you have with your friends and family.
Exactly. It's about using your voice, your platform, your resources to create a more just and equitable world in
Yeah.
whatever ways you can.
So even small actions can make a difference.
Absolutely.
And I think that's an empowering message for our listener who might be feeling overwhelmed by the enormity of these issues.
Right.
You don't have to be a superhero to make a difference.
Hmm.
You just have to be willing to show up and do what you can.
And it's about recognizing that this is a marathon, not a sprint.
Right?
The fight for justice is ongoing.
Yeah.
And there will be setbacks and challenges along the way. But it's important to stay committed, to stay engaged, and to never give up hope.
I love that. It's about having that long-term vision, that unwavering belief that a better world is possible, even when things feel bleak.
I agree. But let's be realistic for a moment.
Yeah.
Gen Z is facing some pretty formidable challenges, both online and offline.
Right.
They're dealing with like a rise in authoritarianism, a backlash against social justice movements, and a media landscape that often distorts or ignores their voices.
Right. So how do they navigate these complex and often hostile environments? What strategies are they using to create change in the face of such resistance?
It's like they're trying to build a better world while the ground is constantly shifting beneath their feet.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but one they're facing head on.
Right.
So one strategy we see emerging is like a focus on coalition building. Gen Z understands that they're stronger together.
Yeah.
So they're reaching across traditional boundaries to form alliances with other marginalized groups, labor unions, environmental organizations, and even faith-based communities.
So it's about recognizing that all these fights for justice are interconnected.
Right.
And that they can achieve more by working together than by working in silos.
Exactly. We're seeing this play out in movements like the Movement for Black Lives, which brings together over 150 organizations fighting for racial justice. They're working on issues ranging from police brutality to economic inequality to environmental justice.
Wow.
Recognizing that these issues are all interconnected.
So it's like they're weaving together a tapestry of resistance.
Yeah.
Each thread representing a different struggle, but all connected to a larger vision of a more just and equitable world.
And they're not just working within existing structures,
Right.
they're creating their own.
Exactly.
We're seeing a rise in like Gen Z-led organizations and initiatives that are challenging traditional hierarchies and power structures.
Can you give us some examples?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I'm curious to hear how they're doing this.
Well, one example is the Black Futures Lab, founded by Alicia Garza, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter.
Oh, wow.
They're building Black political power by engaging Black voters, training Black candidates, and advocating for policies that address the needs of Black communities.
So it's about moving beyond protest and into the realm of policy and governance.
Right.
Recognizing that real change requires a seat at the table where decisions are being made.
Exactly. And they're not waiting for permission to take that seat.
Right.
They're creating their own tables. We're seeing young Black people running for office at all levels of government, from local school boards to the U.S. Congress.
That's amazing.
They're bringing fresh perspectives, bold ideas, and a deep commitment to social justice to the political arena.
It's inspiring to see them stepping into those positions of power and demanding that their voices be heard.
And they're doing it with a level of sophistication and strategic thinking that's really impressive.
Yeah.
They're using data, technology, and social media to organize, mobilize, and advocate for their communities in ways that we haven't seen before.
It's like they're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers.
Exactly. They're thinking several moves ahead, anticipating challenges and developing strategies to overcome them. They're not just reacting to events. They're shaping them.
And they're doing all of this while staying true to the legacy of Black activism, honoring the sacrifices of those who came before them and carrying that torch forward with determination and grace.
It's truly remarkable to witness, and it gives me hope for the future.
Me too.
Gen Z is showing us what's possible when you combine passion, purpose, and a deep understanding of how to leverage the tools of the digital age to create meaningful change. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with a sense of awe at the power and potential of Gen Z's activism. But I'm also curious about how this movement will continue to evolve in the years to come. What do you see as the next chapter in this story?
That's a great question. I think we'll see Gen Z continuing to push the boundaries of what's possible, experimenting with new technologies, forming new alliances, and finding innovative ways to challenge systems of oppression and create a more just and equitable world.
And they'll be doing it with their own unique style, their own voice, their own vision for the future.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see what they do next.
Me neither. And for our listener, I hope this deep dive has inspired you to learn more about Gen Z's activism, to find ways to support their efforts, and to consider how you can contribute to this movement for change.
Remember, the fight for justice is ongoing, and we all have a role to play.
Right.
Even small actions can make a difference. So, what will you do today to make the world a little bit better?
That's it for our deep dive today. Thanks for joining us.
And remember, the fight for justice continues, and we all have a part to play.